We're ready to go whenever you are. And I'd like to welcome everybody to our webinar on the future of food. I'm Emma Kelly from Elevate PR. We're a PR and social media agency here in Dublin. And we've been running these future of events for the last while. We've done one on content, we've done one on beauty and wellness, and we've done one on retail. So we thought food would be a good thing to look at this time of year, particularly with the restaurant sector struggling with the closures and with us all looking for comfort in what we're eating. A little bit of housekeeping. If you'd like to ask any questions, please just put them in the Q&A and we will put them to the panel later on. We're hoping to be about 40 minutes here with the webinar, with some time for questions at the end. And I'm going to hand over now and let my panel introduce themselves, starting with Jillian, who's first in the window here.
Hi, everybody. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Hi, I'm Jillian Nielas. I'm the Deputy Editor of the Business Post magazine, and I'm also the editor of Food and Wine magazine, which the Business Post acquired late last year, or no, actually about 18 months ago now, and brought back into print late last year. And I also write our weekly restaurant reviews.
Niamh?
Hi everyone, my name is Niamh O'Sullivan. I've been working in digital and social media for about 7 years now, and I've been blogging full-time for 2 of those years. I cover topics such as food mostly, then sustainability and personal style.
Paul, you're next.
Hi everybody, I am Paul Kelters. I am the CEO of Jump Innovation, and what we help companies do is to figure out how to, what we call win tomorrow, which is about understanding the opportunities and imperatives that they are faced with, and to try and figure out how to access them through new product innovation, new businesses, new business models, and so on.
Thank you. And then finally, Grace.
Hi everybody, Grace is my name. I work as a trends and insight specialist with Board BIA. I'm responsible for our trends program. I look after a lot of foresight and future studies. Obviously, all the work we do is designed to enable and enhance insight for the food industry, and to enable businesses to future-proof themselves and to think in a more strategic way that enhances commercial growth.
Grace, maybe you'd like to answer the first question I'm putting to the panel today. It's what were the trends that were already apparent in food before COVID?
Hi, okay, so I think I will kick off by talking about 2 trends that have been around a long time, but really have, if I'm to borrow the words from Ernest Hemingway, gradually then suddenly. Health and sustainability are 2 trends that have been around a long time, but really have come into their own in the last while in a more significant way. Let me start with health. If we talk about health and we look at it through the lens of our consumer lifestyle trends program, it's really interesting to see how that has evolved over time. So in early days when we talked about health, we would have talked very much about our physical well-being. Then we moved to a place where we talked about our physical and mental well-being. And now we've reached a place in the pre-COVID world where we're talking about proactive health. So we're looking at health in a holistic way, and that has really been enhanced by technology. So if you think about it, if you sat at the dinner table a few years ago and had a conversation with somebody about the number of steps they'd taken in a day or what their circadian rhythm was, you'd think that person was very strange or the conversation wasn't that normal, but that has become normal discourse. So technology has enhanced the conversation around food and our thinking around our physical health and our mental health. And the result of that is that there is a growing interest in functional foods, and we're looking for more transparency within the foods that we eat. And COVID has brought the conversation on from being proactive, or maybe brought it back to being more about protective health. But I think we'll talk about COVID later on, I think, and the effects of COVID, if I'm correct. Yeah. The other trend that I want to talk about today is sustainability. So under our trends program, we call it responsible living. And again, it's not that long ago that was a nice to have trend, but really now that's become front and center. We talk about the triple bottom line, and as a trend, it's really exciting in terms of the world of innovation. We're seeing lots of things happen in terms of new ingredients emerge. I can think of soline as one ingredient, an ingredient that's a new type of protein, and it is derived through gas-based fermentation, and it can be used to replace flour in foods in the future. We're celebrating old traditional foods like mushrooms. So the lighty porous mushroom has a really rich texture, and that can be used to replace meat textures. So there's lots of interesting things. I could talk forever about sustainability,
Okay.
but again, that's one that has accelerated significantly in COVID, and I'll talk about how and why when it's my turn again.
Paul, would you like to jump in there next?
Yeah.
Trends that we were already seeing before COVID, please.
Yeah, I think the functionality is something that we've worked with Grace on quite a bit, and that's functionality and how food and drink help us with our sort of our brain, our body, our spirit, and our gut. Really, really importantly, that was there. It's still there, and what you're going to find with most of these trends is that they're still present. It's just that how we access them has changed a little bit, which creates new imperatives and opportunities. Health and well-being overall is something that was huge, is huge. I think it's a $4 trillion industry, absolutely massive. Again, how we're accessing it will change a little bit. Food security is the other big deal, and sort of security is a broad human need that is going to ramp up now, was present beforehand, but the food implications there are huge. And sustainability is one. I'm personally, I dislike the word sustainability. I think it's just become a little bit old hat at the moment, and it actually doesn't light the fire beneath people that we need to light. And so in Jump, we call it about companies and brands having pro-earth strategies. All right, so you don't just have a sustainability, which is sort of a backward looking, typically, mending what was gone wrong, but you've got a much more proactive pro-earth strategy, so that we do things, we create brands, we create products, and we advance products that actually help the planet proactively. So health and well-being, functionality across the body holistically, security, and pro-earth would be
very good. Niamh, would you add anything there? You've got a more youthful perspective for us today. And
sorry, I object to that.
You're saying we're all really old.
Thanks a lot, Emma.
I think so, yeah.
Sorry.
I think from my point of view on like a lifestyle level, and just when I think of the everyday person, and I kind of would put myself in that bracket as well, I wouldn't be as deeply rooted in the food industry as the other panelists. But I think in terms of the way things were, I think it was kind of all about convenience. I know I'm like speaking for myself anyway. It was about food on the go and what was handy, and like how could I be as healthy as I wanted to be, but also enjoy my food. And I know in 2020 for sure, I think we've just all had time to really slow down. Cooking from scratch is something that's absolutely huge now. I mean, given that we can't eat out, obviously. But I think as well, we would have all been, I suppose, focused on, eating fresh as well, with food on the move and things like that. And I think I'd say, I suppose priorities have kind of shifted. You don't want to be going and shopping fresh every single day. It's about kind of not stockpiling, but kind of as well at the same time. So I think frozen food is definitely something that I'm turning to a lot more and more, and trying new things. So like meat-free was something that I really tried to introduce more into my diet this year because I had time to. So yeah, I think just slowing down and taking stock of what my priorities were with food has just been kind of a major thing for me anyway.
Jillian, what did you see happening before COVID? And then if you want to comment as well on what you see the COVID impact as being.
Yeah, it's crazy in a way when you try to think of what life was like before COVID. I had to remind myself that there was a general election last year because everything just seems to have been consumed by it. I think the sustainability, or pro-earth as Paul called it, would have been a major conversation in 2020 if events hadn't been overtaken by COVID. And I think that will absolutely roar back once this emergency is over. I think it's such a huge issue now for consumers, especially younger consumers, and that's definitely going to be a big talking point when we get back to normal. And health as well, and even that in terms of eating out. I mean, it was great before everything closed down. You were seeing a lot more healthier options on restaurant menus. I think chefs were more conscious of the fact that not everybody wants to go out. Not everybody every time they go out wants to go, full hurrah. So that was an interesting trend. And again, hopefully that will probably continue. It's been an unbelievable year. And an amazing tribute, I think, to some of the resiliency of our food and restaurant sector. My review last Sunday in the magazine was of Dax, which, as some of you may know, is a very lovely fine dining French restaurant in Dublin city centre, and they managed to reproduce it impeccably in their at-home offering. So that has been an amazing development, and seeing that takeaway delivery option. You know, you're running all the way from the spice bag to the 3-course fine dining meal. And I think another obvious trend that we saw was farm to fork, almost on steroids, in that, you know, it forced a lot of smaller food producers who hadn't been selling online. Well, they had to do it, and they had to do it quickly. So now, you know, it's great because you've got all these amazing food producers that can literally deliver straight to your door. So that's been, and I think it's probably been an eye opener for a lot of SMEs, and this isn't exclusive to the food sector, a lot of SMEs in general have been slow to embrace e-commerce and direct selling, and there's been a fear around it. And I suppose necessity really was the mother of invention, and that they had to do it, and a lot of them have done it really, really well. So that's been another, you know, advantage in a year where there weren't many advantages.
Very good. Paul, what would you add to our list of COVID impacts for the food sector, please?
Yeah, it's funny, it's just Niamh was talking about the slowing down, which actually isn't something that I'd thought of, but I think that is a lovely thought, the slowing down. Now, I've got 4 kids, so it slowed down for a week and then it just went nuts. But thinking beyond that, if you think about food is, particularly in Ireland, we've got a very, very deep relationship with it. It's ingrained in our psyche, and it's very personal. It's very intimate. It's a very enjoyable part of life and of living, and COVID has sort of temporarily broken this in many respects, and so Jillian talks about it coming roaring back. I hadn't used the term roaring back. I thought there'd be a response to this, but roaring back, I think, is much more evocative and better, because I think what we've had the 3 Ds, what I say is the depersonalization of our relationship with food. So we're getting stuff delivered to us, for example. We don't know where it's come from. We don't know who's made it. We haven't picked it up and looked at it, or you shouldn't be picking it up and looking at it anyway. And so we're just that bit more removed. So we're also distanced now from the sources. So our food choices are a bit more depersonalized. We're distanced from the producers and where it's coming from. And we're kind of seeing a bit of danger everywhere. So, you know, we're kind of cautious, despite we don't want to be that at all. So COVID has had that sort of an impact, which is that sort of a fracturing of our deep relationship with food.
Very good. Niamh, what would you see as, you've already mentioned some of the impacts you've seen of COVID, but are there more for you and your followers?
Yeah, definitely. I think in terms of the content that I produce, it would have been previously, like say 2019, definitely a mix, like a real lifestyle mix. There was travel thrown in, everything like that. But I've certainly shifted more towards recipes and food videos. And it's you know, in a weird way, it's kind of been, it was a great year for me last year because I was able to, you know, share all of my recipes and food content that I probably, as I say, as I slowed down, I didn't really have time to kind of dedicate all that time to it before. But I think that people really responded really well to it. And I've noticed definitely a massive jump in engagement and just conversations as well with people in my DMs talking about, you know, different recipes that they've tried that they've enjoyed. It's just become a massive focus for people. And I think it was obviously a habit, and you know, you eat to survive, but I think now it's like food is becoming a hobby for people, and it's becoming a source of joy and downtime as well. I know I personally find cooking a meal from start to finish very therapeutic. So yeah, I think people are kind of looking for the joy that they can and like the simple things, and it's definitely food for the majority of us. And I think as well, I know we mentioned this before, but I think a lot of people are taking more time, and I certainly am, in thinking about what drinks to have with my food as well. So I never would have really considered myself someone who was into wine before COVID, and then I'm kind of trying to learn all about it and trying different cocktails that I wouldn't have before at home. So yeah, I suppose it's just taking our experiences that we enjoyed in restaurants and bars and kind of bringing them into the home and doing our best with them.
Very good. Grace, I'm sure you've got some good data on how COVID has impacted the Irish grocery retail sector. Oh, you're on mute there, Grace.
Sorry, let's go back firstly to looking at health. So 70% of people we know in Ireland from our Feeling the Pinch study feel that the impact of COVID is out of their control. And one of the areas people feel they can have control over is their health. And it's one area where we see people are spending money on. So next to groceries, health is where people are spending money on. And when we look at our data from Feeling the Pinch, 44% of people are looking to improve their health since COVID-19. And this is actually, when we look at our indicator and our tracker work, that's now up 8%. And what we're seeing is an increase in people purchasing supplements and vitamins, but also looking at immunity-based foods. So 34% of people are consuming more foods for immunity. So that's coming from our future-proofing work. And that's up 5% between April and October. So when we talk about immunity, we talk very much on the lines of what Paul was talking around, gut health being one area. So I know that the probiotic market is expected to reach 73 billion by 2024. So gut health is all around the area of defense. Vitamin D is another area, foods with enhanced D. Niamh talked about eating more fruit and vegetables. So 37% of people are eating more fruit and vegetables. People are prioritizing nutritional content, better ingredients. They're looking for more transparency from their food. So to Paul's points around distancing, they want to get closer to food. There's a growing emphasis on local. Local feels safer, it feels fresher. And safety is something that's really, really interesting in terms of how we shop and our relationship with food coming out of COVID. So what we're seeing is that 64% of people are minimizing their trips to stores now. And that's particularly high in Ireland, actually. So we seem to be very, very safety conscious when we look at how we track that across markets. And 36% of people are actually choosing stores based on their actual safety. So safety is really important. And it's interesting to see that translate also into food packaging. So 51% of people want their food and drink to be sealed. Now, on the other hand, if we go and look at sustainability, one of the things that we're seeing, and back to Niamh's point around slowing down, one of the things as we're in the home, we've become much more focused on food and on food waste. And nearly a third of us are reducing our waste more since COVID, and 71% of people expect to continue to do that. So that's really, and that's coming from a world where we're embracing food, we're closer to food more, we're cooking from scratch, as Niamh said. But actually, the counter, the polar argument, as I just talked about, 51% of people want their food to be sealed, but 35% of people are looking for reduced packaging on food. So there is that, back to Jillian's point of our concerns around sustainability, they have actually grown during COVID. It has actually brought the conversation to the fore, and that conversation Paul is having around what is sustainable and greenwashing, people are becoming ever more scrutinous, and that idea of call out culture is becoming more important. And for the anti-hedonist generation, or that younger generation who are looking for that back to basics approach, if anything, it's ever more important and a bigger priority for people now.
Very good. So would anybody on the panel like to give examples of Irish brands or Irish restaurants or who are doing a really good job in COVID, who have pivoted, who have made an impact and a difference?
So I might jump in there, because I think somebody from the company maybe in the chat today, Velvet Cloud in County Mayo make beautiful sheep's yogurt and cheese, would be a very favoured ingredient of a lot of high-end chefs. And from memory, I think Aisling's teenage son got her up and running on a website very quickly to sell directly to consumers, and it was a great example of that being, of literally having to think on your feet and find a market for your product. And they have a great social media presence as well. And I really enjoyed what they did and how quickly they were able to adapt. And I'm sure it must have been a really terrifying time for a lot of small businesses like that.
Anybody else?
Yeah, there was one I particularly enjoyed myself is the White Hag Brewing Company. And what they did is that they sort of played around with the channel, moving to direct to consumer, or sort of played around there a little bit anyway. And they also played around with Christmas time and the fact that we couldn't do the 12 pubs, I suppose. And they created the White Hag Advent calendar. And so basically it was 12 cans of beer or whatever, each one a different flavor, Christmas flavor. So they hopped onto things like the pastry stout trend and a bit of playfulness like that, and some great beers in that. So I thought that was a nice bit of innovation that the lads came up with.
Grace or Niamh, do you have anybody to add, any brand to add there?
I know we talked about pivoting to do good when we spoke the last day. So a lot of the drinks companies, to be fair, pivoted to create hand sanitizer, Drumshanbo, gunpowder being one example of that. So we saw that across the world. I mean, there was a fabulous embracement of community and changing to help various groups. Sorry, Niamh.
No, you're fine. Do you know what I'm loving seeing in terms of companies and COVID is kind of the emergence of small businesses and lockdown projects. So we're seeing a lot of, you know, one-man shows coming out with their own products. One of my best friends started up a grazing board company, and it's just cheese and meats, and she's doing so well. But we're seeing lots of things like that, like dessert boxes. And I suppose COVID has really given people a chance to maybe like realize goals that they would have had, and I suppose given them the opportunity to actually make them a reality, which is so great to see.
Very good. And that brings us on to future trends. What are the kind of lookouts for anybody in the food industry? We've lots of marketeers on the call as well. Where is food going to go? Jillian, do you want to?
Okay, I think it's interesting at the moment. I think all of us are looking for some comfort and escapism in our food, and I think that will probably be around for a while, because even with the vaccine rollout, and hopefully that will pick up speed and we will get to where we need to be, I think there will be an element of nervousness for a little while. And it's interesting what Grace was saying about nervousness. I mean, I found myself definitely most nervous in this wave of the virus, far more. Not that I always followed the guidelines and I did what I was supposed to do, but I don't know if anyone else has felt it. To me, this wave feels by far the most dangerous, the most worrying. So that need for comfort, I think, is definitely still going to be there. I mean, in terms of restaurants, I mean, one thing that's going to be very interesting from a purely business sense is how the whole issue of rents is going to play out, rates. A lot of companies are going to be saddled with debt. So in terms of the restaurant business, that's going to be tricky. You know, the government is going to need to support the sector for probably a long time to come. I mean, after the last recession, we did see a huge amount of creativity, and we saw a lot of new companies and restaurants coming through. And there is a theory that, you know, after a massive trauma, you know, we saw it after World War I, after World War II, after massive traumas or big events, that a couple of years later you get this massive boost of creativity. So that you know, could happen as well. But I think that nervousness will be around for a little while. I think the move away from meat and dairy is only going to get more prevalent. I know.
Question, sorry, we got in the chat there. What are the panelists' opinions on meat substitutes?
On meat substitutes, yeah, I know. Yeah, I'll go to you, Paul, in a minute. I know personally, for me, I'm not mad about the kind of fake burgers, fake sausages. I'd prefer to have to do something with chickpeas or with pulses or lentils rather than. You know, I just don't think a lot of the stuff tastes great, but that's my personal opinion on those. Paul might disagree.
No, Paul wouldn't disagree with you. And that question came from Hugh, I think. Hi, Hugh. And Hugh was asking that because Hugh knows that I'm vegetarian. And I think they are fantastic. And I think that all these meat substitutes are brilliant, because what they might just do is help meat eaters move a little bit away from meat. Our dependency on meat and seafood is not good. We know the figures, we know the damage on the environment. However, we have to balance that with the fact that Ireland has a huge dependency, and a lot of people have a huge dependency on that. I was down in the farmers' protests with the farmers actually last year or the year before, trying to understand what they were protesting about. And you know, for a lot of these guys, it's you know, making a living is really, really hard. So you know, we have to balance sort of supporting a lot of great Irish people and communities that depend on it, along with actually our needs to change our behaviours in order to help the environment and develop those pro-earth strategies. So for me, I don't like them. I don't like that. I prefer something made with chickpeas and lentils and black beans and all of those wonderful things, and celebrating fruit and veg in that way. But if this helps rebalance, I'm all for it.
And then do you see any other future trends, Paul, while we have you?
Crikey. Yeah, look, I mean, the things that were there before COVID, health and well-being, functionality, security, and these ProWorth, that they're all still there. I would say security is going to be big, you know, from farm to fork. I think Grace mentioned a little bit earlier on. We would say now, given the amount of online grocery shopping that's happening, it's kind of from store to door, if you want another little catchy thing. And to guarantee the freshness and the safety and the security of products in that way, that's going to be a big deal. We think that actually, yeah, Grace mentioned the functional foods and the immune thing. Where did I see the data? The weight management side of health and well-being is about $70 billion worth there. Immune support was about $5 billion. I think you're going to see that change. Immune support in food is going to rocket. One of the biggest deals, and forgive me if I'm the vegetarian hippie type, but love is going to be the biggest deal over the next while, actually. And I'd love companies to think about love as in, we've been so far apart from other people, so far removed from our suppliers, from our restaurants, from one another. And all of the shocks that we've had, Brexit, Me Too, Black Lives Matter, the demise or the shaking of democracy, Hong Kong, Australian bush, all of these shocks that we've had have removed us from other and increased the need that we have as people for love. So how can you show love right through your supply chain? Your customers, your providers, your brand, how do you get that out there and really use that as a way to engender a sense of shared spirit, of shared optimism, of shared assurance? And if you can bring that from your brand and your products and through food, wow, how impactful that could be. So yeah, I'm standing up for love here, baby.
Very good. How about you, Grace?
Well, speaking of love, I just thought I'd throw in a stat there that's interesting coming out of our indicator work, that we miss in Ireland, we miss our friends more than any of the other markets that we tracked. So we really are not just a social bunch, but a loving bunch too. Just to kind of pick up from a few points that people talked about. So Jillian talked about comfort, and that undoubtedly will continue to grow. But actually, a couple of things that we're seeing in terms of how it's nuancing, it's tempered by health and that desire now for being a bit healthier. So Paul mentioned weight management, obesity, huge issue. You know, by 2030, half of Americans, I know we're talking about Ireland, but half of Americans will be classified as obese. Obesity is a massive problem. We know it's a big problem for viruses like COVID-19. So replacing comfort indulgent ingredients with more healthful ingredients is something that we are likely to see more of. And snacks and treats, we were indulging a lot in snacks and treats, so 30% of us were having more treats, but that went down by 8% in the tracking from phase 1 to phase 2. So this idea of becoming a little bit more health conscious has come with us, and I'm sure that's cyclical and gone up and down and probably changed over Christmas, but comfort, definitely something that will stay with us and those familiar favorites. To talk about the alt market, again, a market in growth, really exciting, lots of new product launches. I saw that just before Christmas, the first lab grown meat was launched in Singapore with actual approval. So we're likely to see more of that, but I'm going to go back to Paul's point around balance. It is all about balance. You know, 75% of the world's diets come from 12 plants and 5 animal species. So we need to relook at how we eat our food in a more balanced way. And I think that idea of coming together, that idea of love, the challenges around the environment, everybody's embracing and wants to future-proof the future for our future generations. Just going back to one other point around when I was talking about safety in stores, the implications of that, how retail is going to look, and the outlook for retail is or how into the future is going to change dramatically. So we've got things like robots emerging. So only in Northampton, Co-op are rolling out robots. We've got app-led stores becoming more the norm. So Walmart launched 800 app-led stores. That direct-to-consumer model we just see to continue to grow in different ways. The whole disruption around daytime eating and food delivery and convenience, as we know it, has been challenged completely. So those kinds of changes with the introduction of new models are likely to stick with us. So comfort, how we look at our food in terms of it being more sustainable, packaging will be part of that story too. That idea of community, as Paul said, I think I've touched on everything without rambling now.
Very good. And Neve, what future trends are you predicting?
Well, it's not exactly a future trend, but one thing that I just certainly don't see going anywhere is people's kind of, I suppose, reliance on social media when it comes to food. I know definitely since the beginning of our first lockdown, people's accessibility to the likes of Michelin star chefs online. I know the likes of like Eric Matthews are doing Michelin star tips for dining at home. And I think, you know, you see the growth in TikTok and Instagram Reels and video when it comes to food. And I just don't think it's going anywhere. It's growing at such a huge rate. And it's definitely something that I've seen personally with the brands that I work with as well, like video and food and valuable, helpful content, you know, recipes, how people can achieve their goals at home with food is definitely not going anywhere. And I see Claire in the chat is asking about opportunities for brands at the moment. And I think just social media, I know it's not brand new or anything like that, but it's on the up and people have more and more time at home and they're on their phone. We're all scrolling more, we have to admit. You know, a lot of our day-to-day commutes and things that typically would have taken up time previously aren't there anymore. So, you know, we do have more time at home and online. So definitely social media and video for food is huge.
Okay, a couple of questions I see here. One from Rory Carrick about, it's for you, Grace, about the positive impact of technology around food. On the flip side, do you feel that we have swayed too far into the almost obsession with counting calories or meeting our steps goals? And if we don't meet it, is there a negative mental health impact we put on ourselves of not meeting these goals?
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point. I think we have noticed that the consumers have become much more neurotic. There's much more of an intense relationship with food over the last number of years. And, you know, I think what brands need to do is to take that pressure away. I mean, media, and we're all responsible for this. You open any kind of magazine or go online and you're listening to, if you don't do this, you're going to get cancer. If you don't do that, you're going to get Alzheimer's. So, you know, we are living in a world where we're far more educated and sometimes misled. And that leads to lots of challenges in terms of how we feel as a people about our relationship with food. So brand owners need to make food fun and take the seriousness out of it. So it definitely is happening. And I think a lot of the tech brands are much more aware of that. And we've seen a lot of brands introduce kind of tools to enable you to switch off at different points in time. I know one example of a fun one, Dalmio created a pepper hacker to put on the dinner table a few years ago. And the idea was it just looked like your typical pepper canister. And the challenge being a lot of kids being on the phone and nobody having a conversation, but the pepper hacker turns off all the Wi-Fi, which could cause another fight. But technology is really trying to help people. And mental health, just as a completely separate point, is something that we know has become a growing concern during COVID. But what's fantastic is that we're having the conversation, we're talking about it, and trying to really help people with that. But Ireland, again, scored very highly there in terms of concerns around mental health.
Another trend we saw and have covered is gut health, which I think does feed a bit into the mental health, the acknowledgement that what you eat does affect your brain, and you know that you need to have a bit more of, as you said, Grace, a bit more of a varied diet than those core elements. We have a question here from Sarah Deeney. This is about the Irish whiskey category. Are we seeing trends? We haven't really talked about drink that much because it is mostly about food today, but are we seeing trends in the drinks industry, I suppose, and specifically Irish whiskey that anyone would like to call out?
Yeah, I might just jump in, I suppose, from a business point of view. Obviously, Irish whiskey has been phenomenally successful. I would imagine the change of US president will only help that, because I would suspect the Biden administration will be moving away from tariff-based kind of trade war policies. There's an interesting debate. We've covered it a little while ago in the paper on provenance in whiskey brands, and the kind of debate about, you know, a bottle that may say it's made in such and such a distillery, but that, or, you know, it's distilled in wherever, but that it's done on contract rather than, you know, there's nothing wrong with getting spirits made on contract, but I think there is that thing, and it feeds into a little bit of what Grace was saying, of consumers want real honesty in their brands, and you know, there's a great story of you know, a group of Germans turning up to, I think it was the Blackwater Distillery in Waterford, and were, you know, very annoyed because they said they'd been traveling around the country trying to find all these beautiful sounding windswept distilleries, only to find that they were made in a factory and wherever. And, you know, that's fine, but I think it's that honesty, I think, is going to be important in the category. But I think there's huge growth potential still. I mean, Middleton are doing some fascinating work on kind of, you know, with Blue Spot, with brands like that. And on the wider spirit sector, and Niamh referenced this, cocktails, I mean, we have become in our house very fond of craft cocktails and getting them delivered. And I think there is definitely, you know, an opportunity to grow that, you know, and to keep developing those brands.
Anybody else want to jump in there?
Yeah, I mean, on the drinks side of things, it is sort of good times for the Irish category, and the, you know, what have we got, something now like 20 distilleries?
Something like that, Paul. Like, it could
yeah.
be more actually.
Could be more, yeah.
Like that. Spearheaded by Jamison and the team over in Irish Distillers, who've done a stellar job for themselves and for the industry, I suppose, really, when you think about it. So the whole cocktails thing is a big deal. Seltzers, absolutely massive. Even Gordon Ramsay is getting in on that with his Hell's, whatever it's called, seltzer or whatever, which looks fun and interesting, if kind of faddish. I think tequila is going to grow quite dramatically as well. We're doing a lot of work, even with drinks, sort of understanding CBDs and cannabinoids and all of that, how that can work. So it is a wonderful time for the drinks industry and for Irish whiskey, for sure. Provenance is a huge deal, though. I think it's a really interesting thing, and what you're getting a little bit with certain Scotch whiskey distilleries like Bruichladdich, they are doing things like single source grain, and they're owning the fields where the grains are coming from, so they're really getting into provenance and that whole local thing as well. So that's quite interesting, and I think we might even start to see, beyond Connemara, some Irish distilleries starting to smoke their whiskies as well, which might be quite interesting to see what happens there.
Very good. We have a question on brand or restaurant brands becoming more creative, and then maybe something like the Box Park concept in London, where you get to test it in a small way, testing the water on a small term basis. I don't know if you see that question there from Sinead. If anybody wants to comment on how restaurants are pivoting, like we've certainly seen the likes of some of them turning into curated grocery stores and coming up with all kinds of creativity. But do we see other, I hope I'm asking that question correctly, do we see other restaurants coming in being creative but starting small? I suppose a lot of restaurants have started small as well, from food trucks, or you see near me, Meltdown is absolutely, seems to be mushrooming, having started in a small way.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, and Sinead was saying there that, you know, will brands be more cautious? I think they will. And I mean, it's interesting when you think back to before COVID. I mean, the amount of restaurant seats, new restaurant seats that were due to come on in Dublin, I mean, there's no doubt the city was going to be massively saturated. I think what we may see, and it would be no bad thing, is a move away from this trend of brands spending an absolute fortune on their fit out and somehow forgetting that, you know, palatable food is kind of a good thing to have in a restaurant. So I think, yeah, people will be more cautious. I think they'll have to be, because I think the environment for backing is going to be very tricky. So I think, yeah, there's going to be more innovation, I would imagine, as we saw as you know, after the last recession. And I think, yeah, people will definitely look to test and trial, you know. And I mean, the good news with that, though, is that I think that means that, you know, those smaller players, you know, will have an opportunity to break through. And as Niamh said, with social media now, they can connect with a lot more people. So yeah, will we see the bigger brands who maybe have been looking at Ireland being more cautious? Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I think you only have to look at the bloodbath in Britain in terms of restaurant brands. You know, that is definitely going to be tricky. And it wouldn't surprise me if some of the projects that were being talked about before COVID in Dublin city centre in particular, I would be very surprised if they get off the ground.
Another question, if anybody would like to answer it, on the move away from dairy. the move away from dairy, and with Gen Zs, they're living in a more conscious world. How do we see that move away from dairy continuing or not?
Yeah, I think the move away from dairy is, I'm veggie, not vegan, all right? I mean, I love my cheese and my milk, so I'm not going too far down that road. But you have companies like Oatly who are really rocking things. I mean, are they worth something like 2 billion at the moment? They launched in the US recently, really kicking ass over there. They're putting pressure on the likes of the Bundestag to get CO2 limits or impact of brands put on labels and so on. So all of that is part of people's desire to use food, some people's desire to use food as part of their identity. Who you are is what you eat. Yeah, we've kind of heard, or you are what you eat. You've heard that in the past. So the move from dairy or whatever is part of people's identities as sort of more conscious consumer, more involved, thinking more about where things come from, and using that to sort of help me find my place in the world a little bit more. So yeah, I think the move from dairy or whatever is going to continue, and it's going to be something that's a lot of people consider an important part of themselves.
Anybody want to add something? Yeah, go ahead, Grace.
I was just going to say, so dairy, actually, we're going to be publishing a Dietary Lifestyles soon, but dairy is still kind of holding its own in many ways. I think, one of the things, just to a point you're making there, Paul, is, wanting to know where the product comes from. I think when you look at a lot of the plant-based milks, if you look at almonds, I think I had a stat there that highlights how it takes, I think, in terms of the amount of almonds that are produced in a year, meeting the global demand for almonds requires over 2 trillion tons of water a year. So it's back to this point that we need to take a step back and look at the plant foods and the animal foods and how they can work together to deliver the best opportunity for the planet, so to speak. But I think the alt dairy market is delivering well. It's delivering well in terms of brands like Oatly, in terms of flavour. In certain categories, there are certain categories that still seem to need improvement and enhancement. So cheeses is an example, but the milks are doing very well. The meat category to some degree is a bit more challenging if you're somebody who wants the taste and texture of meat. But the move away from dairy, I think it's back to this discussion that I think where we're seeing the real opportunity. So identity is huge, as you say, Paul, but health is another area. So if you want to call it the new age veganism, consumers are scrutinizing what's going into the foods a lot more. As I said, they're looking for more natural ingredients. So they will start to look at these foods to see how natural they are, how they're made, what ingredients are in them, are there any preservatives? It's going to be really interesting to see how that space evolves. And I think particularly as the consumer is likely to be more of a flexitarian or a juicitarian who comes into this space. So it's not just about sustainability, it is also about health and identity, as you say, all those things coming together.
We have to talk about Brexit as well, I suppose, given that it's so live and it is having a bit of an impact. Carmel Ryan has asked about empty shelves in Marks and Spencer's last week. Are we going to see more Irish brands and that like a change in the supply chain as a result?
Yeah, it's very interesting, and it will be very interesting to see how the M&S issue plays out for them. And I think definitely they will look, I would imagine, to get more Irish products. I interviewed a while back Vincent Cleary from Glenisk, and he was making the point that in France, you wouldn't see anything other than French yogurts in a supermarket. They just wouldn't do it. So I think there is definitely an opportunity for us to have more of that Irish brand there. I know East Coast Bakehouse were tweeting this morning about, they were talking on Claire Byrne last night about biscuit shortages from the UK, and they were saying, it's okay, we can help you with that. So I think the more, as the reality of Brexit, kicks in, I think there certainly would be opportunities there for people now. I mean, again, for a lot of small companies, it's difficult to make that jump to deal with the supermarket. You're scaling in a much bigger way, and it may not be right for your business to do that. I mean, I think bigger is not always better. Sometimes, an SME is probably better staying at that level rather than stretching themselves. But yeah, I think as the more we learn about Brexit, I think there probably will be more opportunities for Irish brands.
Niamh, there's a question here about low alcohol, non-alcohol, and not deferring to you as the alcohol expert, but given that you have been making cocktails, do you think there is that non-alcoholic trend is going to grow, or low alcohol trend is going to grow?
Yeah, I mean, I feel as though in 2019 that was a huge trend. The low alcohol and no alcohol spirits were kind of coming onto the scene. And I know in 2020 that alcohol sales were very much on the up. I, for the first time in my life, have an at-home bar cart behind me, which is something that I never really thought that I would have. But I suppose it's kind of like just a shift, I suppose, in, you know, your Friday and Saturday nights at home. But yeah, I think as things get back to normal, hopefully, touch wood, in the next couple of months and in the next year or so, we definitely will see people going back to that, because it was having such a moment, and they're great products, and I know there's a lot of Irish brands doing them as well. So yeah, hopefully we will get back to that.
There's so many questions here, we're actually not going to be able to answer them in time, but are there any favourite food discoveries from the panel in the past year from Ali Dunworth?
It's probably bad of me to say the craft cocktails range. I'm making myself sound like I don't do anything but drink cocktails, but I think, like a lot of people, I'm probably not. I'm drinking better quality things, and I love the way they've packaged their brands. The products are really lovely, and yeah, that would probably be for me one of the best I've tried. Oh, and the cakes from Le Patisserie, who do lovely cake box deliveries. So again, it's that comfort thing. So I've enjoyed those too.
Comfort, is it? Yeah, cocktails and cake. Comfort.
Exactly. You know, I'm a simple person. You know, yeah, I'm easily pleased. Yeah.
I'm actually, for me, actually, the lack of discovery and the actual bloody boredom with food and with what we do, because it's kind of, I mean, we're sleeping, we're getting up, we're working, still working very hard, and we're still doing the homes, and we're still doing all of this sort of stuff as well. And then to go home and cook for, or to go home, to be at home, whatever, to cook for 6 people or whatever, it's kind of like, it's just all the comfort staples, whatever. And so discovery just, and I'm dying, and I think this is going to be part of the roaring back that Jillian mentioned earlier on, and the restaurant business. It's getting back and show me something fantastic. Help me celebrate this newfound freedom that I have again. Give me a place. And I don't necessarily agree that, you know, less investment in the place. I think more investment in the place. Give me somewhere that's wonderful.
But not at the expense of the food, though. And I think that's what we've seen in a lot of places, you know. I mean, I love a nice room as much as the next person, but
yeah.
You know.
It's like Bastable had sort of like their sharing table a little bit. I want more of that. I want more sort of Baroque and Rococo and food and wonderful and celebration and Devil May Care and the Roaring 20s. Good Lord, give it to me.
Great
and let me cover, with hedonistic glee. So I do think actually that is going to be an opportunity for people. This whole discovery, indulgence, but mix it with the other things. So healthy indulgence will be a big opportunity area that people will experience, or brands could capitalize on. Fun, brilliant, Rococo, Baroque type foods, whatever they may be, along with the lack of compromise. So it's still doing something good for me. All right. So healthy indulgence is something that people should tap into too.
Grace or Niamh, do you have any discoveries?
I have to say, I can't think of anything. I think the highlight of my day has been walking into our local village for a cup of coffee and exploring the local coffee shops. And I've now gone from caffeine to decaf at the moment, so I'm exploring that on my healthy indulgence, if you want to call that, Paul. But foods, yeah, I've been very lucky that my husband has been doing a lot of the cooking, I might add, but I am looking for the Roaring 20s as well, you know, and new experiences and embracing restaurants and just getting out once more.
Mm-hmm. See, Niamh and Jillian probably get sent quite a lot of stuff, you know, as journalists and as influencers. So Niamh, have you been sent anything special?
I suppose on the discovery of food, I can't think of anything that I've been sent specifically, but this might sound a bit bizarre, but I feel like just back to the slowing down type of thing, I'm finding that I'm making more of an effort in, you know, as opposed to picking up meat on the go or eating out, I'm actually going into the butchers and seeing what they recommend and having a conversation with people who can really advise. So that's definitely been a huge discovery for me, even though I know it's very obvious and would have been very typical for other people. But just as someone who, it was definitely a huge part of my life, I think it's been more of a priority and something that I look forward to now, going into the butcher on a Friday and looking for a really nice piece of meat to cook that night, and kind of getting advice, and I suppose in slowing down, having a conversation with someone who knows what they're talking about. And yeah, I suppose finding inspiration online as well, from cook-alongs and things like, you know, kind of Instagram lives and things like that. Social media is such a great source of inspiration. So there's always something new to try. But now I'm going to be more mindful about my discoveries, because I feel like there's lots out there and I need to actually be a little bit more adventurous myself.
One last question I'm going to throw out to the panel. What do you think, this is from Kieran Keegan, what do you think is the future of takeaway boxes, cook at home trends for restaurants as an option for staying open?
Yeah, I think as certainly in the initial stages after we move out of this, as I said, I think a lot of people will still be maybe a little bit nervous until everything gets fully back to normal. And I did see Mike Ryan from the WHO in an interview the other day saying that, you know, COVID-19 is not the big one. The big one is yet to come. It's like, thanks, Mike, thanks for that. But, you know, I think it's interesting. I mean, some of the chefs I've talked to have loved doing them, and some of them have tried it and it just really wasn't for them. So I suppose it'll depend. I mean, it has opened up another income stream for some people. And I mean, I would have loved the idea when my son was young, when getting a babysitter was such a lot of hassle and getting into town and out again. I would have loved the opportunity to have an amazing meal delivered as opposed to the local Chinese. So, you know, there could be still a market there for them. And even, you know, as we were talking before about like the likes of Forest Avenue, who've opened a fantastic wine shop and a kind of a local grocery store, which has been, you know, done really well for them. So I think that hybrid model may stay. And I think that it's been an eye opener probably for a lot of chefs and restaurateurs, that, you know, there are other things they can do and other ways they can get to consumers.
Anybody else?
We work with a company in Britain called Oddbox, and you know, even before COVID, they were starting to see things really rocket, and business was flying, and they were looking to launch into more parts of Britain. So I see that home delivery thing, and I don't mean Tesco, I mean that of food, of packages, whatever, growing. Not necessarily as a meal kit thing, but although who knows. And from restaurants, I mean, restaurateurs love doing what restaurateurs do, which is to cook awesome food for people and watch them enjoy it. I mean, that's what the pleasure of that industry is. So I don't know. People like wasn't it Mike's on Mount Marion? They did a lot of that stuff and sort of takeaway stuff as well. Got rave reviews for that. But I know from reading that guy on Twitter, his passion is cooking for people and feeding people, and so there may be demand for those boxes, but I see a lot of the people providing the demand possibly going back to what they do and love best. So I would expect it to peter out a little bit.
And maybe like people, I know Gaz from Mike's and Little Mike's has done like really interesting little things where you get your little packet of pasta and your packet of crab and your packet of sauce. And so away you go and you've got your dinner. So that may stick around, you know,
yeah,
that
I can
kind
see
of
that
simple,
sticking around. Yeah.
You know, yeah, simple kind of ways to grab stuff, as you said, Paul, rather than the full production of
ready to eat kind of gourmet food.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So you have your Friday night treat in. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Niamh, any closing comment from you there on takeaways, or any final thoughts on food trends before we let everybody go and have their lunch?
I think on the takeaways, I've probably tried a few more than I would have anticipated. And for me, it's just made my list of to go to restaurants so long for when things do open up. So yeah, it's been great. It's been great to sample different foods and I suppose treat yourself in the times that we're in.
I think we'll wrap it up there, guys, because it's just coming up to lunchtime. And I'd like to say thank you very much to an excellent panel, and thank you to our audience who sent in so many questions. And I'm sorry we didn't get to everything, but maybe we'll just have to run another one another time later in the year. But thank you. It feels like the future of food is bright, and we all want to be involved, at least in eating, if not promoting and talking about it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.